devices, as we mentioned, are mental tools to help hold material in memory, cued for ready recall. Mnemosyne, one of the 9 muses of Greek mythology, was the goddess of memory. Some examples of simple mnemonic devices are acronyms like Roy G. Biv, for the colors of the rainbow, and reverse acronyms as in I value xylophones like cows dig milk, or the ascending value of Roman numerals from 1 to 1,000, e.g. V equals 5, D equals 500. A memory pouch is a more complex type of mnemonic device that is useful for organizing and holding larger volumes of material in memory. It is based on the method of loci, which goes back to the ancient Greeks and involves associating mental images with a series of physical locations to help cue memories. For example, you imagine yourself within a space that is very familiar to you, like your home, and then you associate prominent features of the space, like your easy chair, with a visual image of something you want to remember. When you think of your easy chair, you may picture a limber yogi sitting there to remind you to renew your yoga lessons. The features of your home can be associated with a countless number of visual cues for retrieving memories later, when you simply take an imaginary walk through the house. It is important to recall the material in a certain order, and can be sequenced along the route through your house. The method of loci is also used to associate cues with features you encounter along a very familiar journey, like your walk to the corner store. As we write this passage, a group of students in Oxford, England, are constructing memory palaces to prepare for their A-level exams in psychology. Every week, for 6 weeks, they and their instructor have visited a different cafe in town, where they have relaxed over coffee, familiarized themselves with the layout of the place, and discussed how they might imagine it occupied with vivid characters who will cue from memory important aspects of psychology that they will need to write about at a same time. We'll come back to these students, but first, a few more words about this technique, which is surprisingly effective and derives from the way imagery serves to contribute vividness and connectedness to memory. Humans remember pictures more easily than words. For example, the image of an elephant is easier to recall than the word elephant. So it stands to reason that associating vivid mental images with verbal or abstract material makes that material easier to retrieve from memory. A strong mental image can prove as secure and bountiful as a loaded stringer of fish. Tug on it, and the whole day's catch comes to the surface. When a friend is reminding you of a conversation with somebody the two of you met on a trip, you struggle to recall it. She tells you where the discussion happened, and you picture the place. Ah, yes, it all comes flooding back. Images cue memories. Mark Twain wrote about his personal experiences with this phenomenon in an article published by Harper's. In his days on the speaking circuit, Twain used a list of partial sentences to prompt himself through the different phases of his remarks, but he found the system unsatisfactory. When you planted snippets of text, they all look alike. He experimented with alternatives, finally hitting on the idea of outlining his speech in a series of crude pencil sketches. The sketches did the job. A haystack with a snake under it told him where to start his story about his adventures in Nevada's Carson Valley. An umbrella tilted against a stiff wind took him to the next part of his story, the fierce winds that blew down out of the Sierras at about 2 o'clock every afternoon, and so on. The power of these sketches to evoke memory impressed Twain, and gave rise one day to an idea for helping his children, who were still struggling to learn the kings and queens of England, despite long years invested by their nanny in trying to hammer the names and dates through crude repetition. It dawned on Twain to try visualizing the successive reigns. Quote, "We were at the farm then. From the house porch, the ground sloped gradually down to the lower fence and rose on the right, the high ground, where my small work den stood. A carriage road wound through the grounds and up the hill. I staked it out with the English monarchs, beginning with William the Conqueror, and you could stand on the porch and clearly see every reign and its length from the Conquest down to Victoria. Then, in the 46th year of her reign, 817 years of English history under your eye at once. I measured off 817 feet of the roadway, a foot representing a year. And at the beginning and end of each reign, I drove a 3-foot white pine stake in the turf by the roadside and wrote the name and dates on it, unquote. Twain and the children sketched icons for each of the monarchs, a whale for William the Conqueror, because both names begin with W, and because, quote, it's the biggest fish that swims, and William is the most conspicuous figure in English history, unquote. A hen for Henry I, and so forth. Quote, we got a good deal of fun out of the history road, and exercise too. We trotted the course from the Conqueror to the study, the children calling out the names, dates, and length of reigns as we passed the stake. The children were encouraged to stop locating things as being over by the arbor or in the oak copse or up at the stone steps, and say instead that the things were in Stephen or in the Commonwealth or in George III. They got the habit without trouble. To have the long road mapped out with such exactness was a great boon for me, for I had the habit of leaving books and other articles lying around everywhere, and had not previously been able to definitely name the place, and so had often been obliged to go to fetch them myself, to save time and failure. But now I could name the reign I left them in, and send the children, unquote. Rhyme schemes can also serve as mnemonic tools. The peg method is a rhyme scheme for remembering lists. Each number, from 1 to 20, is paired with a rhyming concrete image. 1 is bun, 2 is shoe, 3 is tree, 4 is store, 5 is hive, 6 is tricks, 7 is heaven, 8 is gate, 9 is twine, 10 is pen. After 10, you add penny 1 and start over with 3-syllable cue word. 11 is penny 1, setting sun. 12 is penny 2, airplane blue. 13 is penny 3, bumblebee, and so on, up to 20. You use the rhyming concrete images as pegs on which to hang items you want to remember, such as the tasks you want to get done today. These 20 images stay with you, always at the ready whenever you need help to remember a list of things. So when you're running errands, Bun gives you the image of a hairstyle and reminds you to buy a hat for your ski trip. Shoe reminds you of being well dressed, prompting you to pick up the dry cleaning. Tree reminds you of family tree, cueing that birthday card for your cousin. The rhyming images stay the same, while the associations they evoke change each time you need to hold a new list in mind. A song that you know well can provide a mnemonic structure, linking the lyrics in each musical phrase to an image that will cue retrieval of the desired memory. According to the anthropologist Jack Weatherford, the preeminent historian of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, traditional poems and songs seem to have been used as mnemonic devices for sending messages accurately over vast distances from China at one end of the empire to Europe at the other end. The military were forbidden from sending written messages, and how they communicated remains a secret, but Weatherford thinks mnemonic devices were a likely method. He notes that the Mongol song known as the Long Song, for example, which describes the movement of the horse, can be sung in varying tones and trills so as to communicate movement through a particular location, like a crossing of the steppe or of the low mountains. The versatility of mnemonic devices is almost endless. What they hold in common is a structure of some kind: number scheme, travel route, floor plan, song, poem, aphorism, acronym, that is deeply familiar and whose elements can be easily linked to the target information to be remembered. To return to the psychology students preparing for their A-level exams, in a classroom at Bellerby's College in Oxford, a dark-haired 18-year-old whom we'll call Marlis sits down to write her A2 exams in psychology. She will be asked to write 5 essays over the course of 2 testing sessions, totaling 3.5 hours. A-level courses are the British equivalent of advanced placement courses in the United States and are prerequisites for going on to university. Marlis is under a lot of pressure. For one thing, her exam scores will make the difference in whether or not she gets into the university of her choice. She has applied to the London School of Economics. To be assured a spot in a top university in the United Kingdom, students are required to take A-levels in 3 subjects, and the grades they must earn are published in advance by the universities. It's not at all unusual that they are required to earn an A grade in each subject. If they earn less than the required grade, they must compete in a difficult clearing process by which the universities fill up their remaining spaces, a process that bears a lot in common with a lottery. If that weren't stress-inducing enough, the scope of the material for which Marlis must be prepared to show mastery in the next hour and a half is enormous. She and her fellow psychology students have studied 6 major topics in their second year of A-level preparations: eating behavior, aggression, relationships, schizophrenia, anomalistic psychology, and the methods of psychological research. Within each of the first 5 topics, she must be prepared to write essays on 7 different questions. Each essay must illuminate the answer in 12 short paragraphs that describe, for instance, the thesis or condition, the extant research and its significance, the countervailing opinions, any biological treatments, say for schizophrenia, and how these relate to the foundational concepts of psychology that she mastered for her first year A-levels. So she faces 5 major topics times 7 essay questions for each topic, with a dozen succinct, well-argued paragraphs in each essay to show mastery of the subject. In other words, the universe of different essays she must master going into exams is a total of 35, plus a series of short answers to questions on psychological research methods. Marlis knows which of the main topics will be the subject of today's exam, but she has no idea which essay questions will be assigned, so she's had to prepare herself to write on all of them. Many students who reach this point simply freeze. Despite being well-grounded in their material, the stakes at play can make their minds go blank the moment they confront the empty exam booklet and the proctor's ticking clock. That's where having taken the time to construct a memory palace proves as good as gold. It's not important that you understand the intricacies of British A-levels, just that they are difficult and highly consequential, which is why mnemonic devices are such a welcome tool at exam time. Today, the 3 test topics turn out to be evolutionary explanations of human aggression, the psychological and biological treatments for schizophrenia, and the success and failure of dieting. Okay, for aggression, Marlis has got the she-wolf with her hungry pups at the window of the Krispy Kreme shop on Castle Street. For schizophrenia, she's got the over-caffeinated barista at the Starbucks on High Street. For dieting, that would be the extremely large and aggressive potted plant inside the Café Pret-a-Manger on Cornmarket Street. Excellent. She settles in her seat, sure of her knowledge and her ability to call it up. She tackles the dieting essay first. Pret-a-Manger is Marlis's memory palace for the safekeeping of what she has learned about the success and failure of dieting. Through a prior visit there, she has become thoroughly familiar with its spaces and furnishings, and populated them with characters that are very familiar and vivid in her imagination. The names and actions of the characters now serve as cues to the dozen key points of her essay. She enters the shop in her mind. La Fern, the man-eating plant in Little Shop of Horrors, one of her favorite movies, is holding Marlis's friend, Herman, captive, her violence wrapped tightly around him, restraining him from a large dish of mac and cheese that sits just beyond his reach. Marlis opens her exam book and begins to write. Herman and Mac's restraint theory suggests that attempting not to overeat may actually increase the probability of overeating. That is, in restrained eaters, it is the disinhibition, loss of control, that is the cause of overeating. In this manner, Marlis works her way through the cafe and the essay. Herman breaks free of his restraints with a mighty roar and makes a beeline for the plate, practically inhaling the pasta to the point of bursting. Quote, restraint theory received support in studies by Wardle and Beale, which found that obese women who restrained their eating actually ate more, inhaled the pasta, than obese women who took up exercise, and more than those who made no changes to their diet or lifestyle. However, Ogden argues, and so on. Marlis moves mentally through the cafe clockwise, encountering her cues for the boundary model of hunger and satiety, biases arising from cultural inclinations to obesity, the problems with diet data based on anecdotal evidence, metabolic differences related to high levels of lipoprotein lipase levels, little pink lemons, and the rest. From Pret-a-Manger, she moves on to the Krispy Kreme shop, where a mental walk through the interior cues images that in turn cue what she's learned about the evolutionary explanations of aggression. Then on to Starbucks, where the crazed barista and the shop's floor plan and clientele cue her through 12 paragraphs on the biological treatments of schizophrenia. Marlis's psychology teacher at Bellerby's College is none other than James Patterson, the boyish-looking Welshman who just happens to be a rising figure in world memory competitions. When teachers at Bellerby's fill out the paperwork to take students on field trips, it's typically to a lecture at the Saute Business School, or perhaps to the Ashmolean Museum or Bodleian Library in Oxford. Not so with James. His paperwork will more likely seek approval to take students to any of half a dozen different cafes around town, comfortable settings where they can tap into their imaginations and construct their mnemonic schemes. In order for the students to nail all 35 essays securely in memory, they divide the topics into several groupings. For one group, they build memory palaces in cafes and at familiar locations around the Bellerby's campus. For another group, they use the PEG method. Still, other groups link to imagery in favorite songs and movies. We should make one important point, though. Before Patterson takes students on their mnemonic outings to construct memory palaces,